Back in 2005, 6, and 7, when I was writing my book, I wrote that there would be inflation and then the threat of deflation. I said that Ben Bernanke would be the next Fed chairman, and he would overreact with big helicopter drops of currency, which he ended up doing. So the threat of deflation was the popping of the stock market and the real estate bubble in 2007 and 8. And then he would overreact, which would drive us into big inflation, but then there would be a real deflation, a contraction of the currency supply. That's a popping of the bond bubble, is what I see, that will bring real deflation, and then all the world's central banks in unison will be overreacting and potentially printing us into hyperinflation. I call it the roller coaster crash. You believe that we're going straight into inflation, right? And
well, we already had that. They've already tried to scare us with deflation, right? They've tried to say, oh, we have to fight deflation. We have to make sure that we have more inflation. The Federal Reserve has a target of 2% inflation. And they've told us now that inflation is not high enough, that we need more inflation. So we've already had that boogeyman, this phony scare. And so the government is doing everything that it can to prevent a healthy deflation. Deflation is the solution to our problems, but the government has a different agenda. The government is trying to continue to prop up asset markets. And of course, inflation benefits debtors. And the government, being the world's largest debtor, and not just our government, other governments, rather than defaulting, they want to inflate. They want to pretend to pay people back with money of diminished value. So I think we've already seen that. And I don't think the governments are going to let the bond bubbles burst because there's too much at stake. They should. But I think just as people want out of these bonds, the governments are just going to step up their efforts. And I don't think we've seen anything yet with respect to quantitative easing. I think they can come back. They were doing $85 billion a month before. They can come back with $150, $200 billion a month. I mean, whatever, they'll do whatever it takes. But I don't think we're going to see, when you talk about deflation, I don't think we're going to see a situation where the cost of living actually comes down in terms of dollars. We could see some declines in real estate prices. I'm talking about a contraction
of the currency supply, because I go for the Austrian definition of inflation and deflation, which is an expansion or a contraction of the currency supply, and then prices follow.
But even if current supply were to contract, if the velocity were to pick up at the same time, it's a question. And it's a question of, do people want that currency? And ultimately, if nobody wants the money at all, it doesn't matter how much it contracts. Right. If nobody wants the money, there's no demand for that money. Or if people want to get rid of it as soon as they get a hold of it, because they don't want to be caught when the music stops. So I think we've already passed that point. And remember, we had a big rally in the dollar in 2008 when I think people reacted the wrong way to the financial crisis. And even with that big rally in the dollar, we still didn't have falling consumer prices in the United States in 2008. Prices still rose, even in an environment where the dollar strengthened dramatically. And in fact, we've just had a big increase in the value of the dollar, and consumer prices are still rising. We're on the precipice of something huge, and you've got the powers that be telling us everything is great and there's nothing to worry about. Right? But there's a lot to worry about, and people have to do what they can on their own to protect themselves.